Hello everyone and welcome to Outriders New Horizon. In today's video we're going to explore a Pyromancer Anomaly power build focusing on single target DPS, and I have made some tests to see how much defenses we can invest without dying, and I managed to make a build with zero defense investments apart from the talents. I have made two variations of the build depending on the skill choices and mods, so without any further delay let's jump right into it. We're going to of course in both cases use the Akari set 3 pieces, and we're going to use for the first build the Heatwave, the Phaser Beam and the Thermal Bomb to maximize single target DPS. I will leave all the armor amounts in the background to take a screenshot, but let's break them down a little bit one by one. 3 pieces of the Akari set to get that powerful Anomaly power bonus. It's one of the best, if not the best set for Anomaly power. Every enemy damaged by Heatwave will grant 50% Anomaly power boost for 10 seconds. I don't know if you're familiar, this has been nerfed some patches ago and now has a limit. If you damage 10 enemies, you won't get a 500% Anomaly power boost. It has a cap of 300%. For example, we have 156,000 Anomaly power. No matter how many enemies we damage, we will still get a maximum of 481,000 Anomaly power because of the Anomaly Echo, that's why these get the number, and without any other mods we cannot further increase it using the Akari set. That's why you will see I have included the Ashen Champion in the helmet, because now Phaser Beam will inflict Ash instead of burn. We don't care, we have the Heatwave for the burn. However, we get an Anomaly power boost by 20%, a maximum of 100% if you hit 5 enemies. So how much Anomaly power we get if we use the Heatwave and the Phaser Beam? The answer is 832,000 Anomaly power. That's the cap I have because of my talents. It can go a little up or lower depending on your talents that you choose, but that's actually quite enough to increase our skills to tremendous amount of damage. Moving on to the chest, you have to probably get a second carry set because usually we keep the detonator, but because we're not going to use the overheat, we have to replace detonator with branded and leave the tidal wave because it's actually good. Branded, enemies affected by the thermal bomb will receive 40% more damage. This is actually the further increase for the single target DPS. I'm also including burnout for further debuffing the enemies from heatwave, and I have left the Anomaly Echo from the waist of the Akari. For the gloves and boots you have to go with Anomaly power, cooldown reduction and status power, because status power scales the phaser beam damage and the damage from our burn, so these are the best stats you can get. I have included Fire Frenzy and Double Fan. Fire Frenzy, you will use the thermal bomb twice. Double Fan, it will hit 2 enemies. Make sure to hit your target and another one close by, so this is very good value. And for the boots I have included Size Matters and Frequent Phaser. As you may have noticed, there are 0 defensive mods, because actually we don't need them. As long as you keep playing and burning the enemies, you cannot die. I will explain a little later, but let's have a look at the weapons. I have included the Fortress to not only increase our damage from the burn, the skills and everything else, but also our armor, so it acts both a little more defensive and offensive. Damascus offering my new favorite weapon, status power, skill life leads, claymore torrent. We can add the Fortress on top of it, one of the best weapons. It procs Fortress very fast thanks to the very high RPM. Secondary weapon, the guillotine or the Anomaly shotgun with radiation splash and morning winds. I'm not using this as often, you kill the enemies so easy. I just use this against some alphas or in case you get surrounded, or do a little more burst against bosses that don't get one-shotted. And the sidearm, I don't use it almost at all, but I have the shadow comment just in case with the storm whip as well. Let's have a closer look at the talents we're using, focusing mainly on the firestorm tree, only a couple of nodes to get the words ablaze to reduce the cooldown of the thermal bomb to just make our rotation smoother. We focus on the magma golem, and I have also taken the distant flame, the extinction, and I had to go with anomalous lava, because now we get a 45% increased armor. Without this, actually we were a little more squishy, but now with this and the Fortress mode we have 66 to 67% damage reduction without any defensive mods, and that's more than enough. Because we're not using overheat, the burn will remain on the enemies until they die, and because we also have fuel for the embers, in case we go to low health, we get double skill life leech. So you see the life leech in the end, it's close to 1,000,000. That's why we survive. We have a lot of extra health, we have a lot of skill life leech, enemies are burning, we will not consume the burn with overheat. That's why I love this build. You just burn them, deal extra damage to burning enemies, have very decent cooldowns actually for the skills. And Thermal Bomb, although it may seem it doesn't have the best cooldown, it's more than enough to add to the rotation, because usually you use the Thermal Bomb to kill high health enemies or enemies far away to trigger Thermal Bomb with a Claymore Torrent and just finishing them off very fast. Let's have a closer look at the second variation of the build. We're now using Overheat instead of Thermal Bomb as a DPS skill, and we have made a few changes. We have kept the detonator for the armor of the Akari, and we are using Ants on Fire and Captain Hunter instead of the mods that we were using for Thermal Bomb. Ants on Fire actually are very important because without this, the Overheat will not deal enough damage to idle enemies, and that's the power of the Overheat. It stuns enemies on the whole map and deals sufficient damage to wither them down. However, we have to go a little differently about the rotation. Because we don't have much survivability for the mods, we have to keep the enemies burning, so you don't have to spam overheat, and that's why here this is actually a flex slot, the Words Ablaze. You don't have to take this in case you go with overheat. I'd recommend to either take an extra Archmage or Trial by Fire to further increase your DPS, because overheat will act a little more of burst damage or to stun the enemies or as an opener, and as long as you are not fighting bosses. In case you have trouble surviving even while using either build, I do recommend to replace the burnout for the first build or the double fan with damage absorber, so you have to increase your survivability a little further. And for the second variation, you have to either replace the Captain Hunter or the Pants on Fire, so you have to either sacrifice a single target DPS or a wave for damage absorber. I do recommend to sacrifice Captain Hunter because you need Pants on Fire, otherwise you don't have so good AoE capabilities with overheat, but that's up to you. Let's have a look at the rotation. You open with Prokin Fortress, you don't have to aim, you only need to shoot enemies, and in 1 or 2 seconds you will have the fortress. You follow up with Heatwave, double Heatwave to just burn the enemies, debuff them, get hopefully that 300% Anomaly power boost, double Thermal Bomb against the bosses or high health enemies, Phaser Beam to decimate them, and just repeat the rotation. Make sure to also proc the Morning Winds and Radiation Splash in case the enemies survive, and also don't forget Claymore Torrent has a 2-second cooldown, so you can shoot in between. And when you just switch your weapons, make sure to just proc Fortress before you start your rotation once again, because you need that armor and you need that 30% extra damage, because enemies will keep burning. You will just keep that high DPS, because actually burn is the second highest DPS source using this build. The second build is quite similar. Once again, you have to open with Fortress. Now you have 2 choices. You can open with Overheat in case you want to interrupt the enemies that are very far and just get close by them, because after you follow up the rotation, you will still have overheat back, double heat wave and phaser beam and then overheat. However, there is another type of rotation against idle enemies. You have to use heat wave, then overheat, and then heat wave again, because phaser beam doesn't apply the burn in case you don't kill the enemies and they don't have burn. You have used it with overheat. It's very easy to die, so you have to be extra careful. Make sure enemies are burning when you use the overheat. Otherwise, it's very easy to die and very dangerous. So let's see what are the advantages and disadvantages of the first versus the second build. The first build has higher survivability. We have huge health and enemies will keep burning whatever we do. We don't consume the burn, so you can kill them quite easy. It has much better high damage against bosses. That's a huge advantage. Not against the Lich specifically, because the other build with the overheat can still decimate normal elites, or the altered, let's say, the behemoths, some brute mothers with not so much health. The thermal bomb build, the first one I like, can just destroy the bosses and those enemies much easier. And overheat needs a little better playstyle in case you don't want to sacrifice DPS and switch your mods. You have to just use this rotation to make sure enemies are getting burnt, otherwise survivability it's very risky. In my opinion, I do prefer the first build. It can be a little slower against some enemies because they will hide in the back and you cannot kill them with overheat as you just progress through the level, but I do like the potential for the single target DPS. If I had to give you some tips, apart from keep burning the enemies I have mentioned already, be careful of the Jefferson starships in case you don't know which are those are the flying birds. They deal enormous amount of damage. You can burn them with heat wave and just destroy them. I do recommend to either burn them once with heat wave, shoot a claymore torrent. Once they land, it's very easy to hit them with phaser beam, and that's it. They will probably die from the remaining of the burn. However, 1 versus 1 is easy, but 1 versus many, it's quite harder, so burn all the other enemies, shoot a couple of thermal bombs to them to proc a little more damage with a claymore torrent, so they can just go down, use the phaser beam, and just one-shot them. And that was it for today's video. I really hope this will help you choose your own mods and skills and setup using Anomaly Power Pyromancer single target DPS. So feel free to like if you liked, and you can subscribe to stay tuned for more upcoming videos for Outriders and other video games. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.